What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast. As always, I'm super jazzed to have you here. Today, we're going to talk about 3 ways of thinking about money that are going to set you up to play the money game better and hopefully win it. These are simple heuristics or simple mental models, as our boy Charlie Munger would say, that I think will serve you very well if you can adopt them, because will give you a different lens to look at this money game through. And it's one that or all 3 of these are different lenses that I think a lot of people don't consider. So number 1 is wealth is the ratio between what you make and what you keep. I first heard this put in these terms by Alex Hormozi. I think it's a really brilliant way. That wealth is the ratio between what you make and what you keep. For instance, if you make $50,000 a year, but you only have $5,000 a year of expenses, then that means each year you're putting $45,000 in the bank, which is equivalent to 9 years worth of expenses, right? So for every year you work, you're creating or generating 9 years of wealth. So you just, you draw this out and you say, okay, well, if I was to work for, the next 10 years, I would have 90 years of wealth. That means you could retire effectively for the next 90 years, right? And so there's 2 ways then that you can increase your wealth. Number 1 is you increase your income. And I think that's overall the best way because it's infinite. You could literally go out there and make $1 million. You could make $1 billion. But you can only cut your expenses so far, right? And in that example that he gave with the $50,000 and $5,000 of living expenses, that's pretty unrealistic because how are you only going to live off of $5,000? That's probably not even enough to cover your food for the year. So that's an extreme example to make the point, to show the example. But I do believe focusing on increasing your income is generally the better way to increase your overall wealth. But it is important that you maintain your expenses, that you keep an eye on that, because what I see happen a lot when people come into money is they experience lifestyle creep. So you might start making $1 million, but you start buying that nice car, that nice house, that nice jewelry, all these things. You go on these trips and you eat out. And next thing you know, your expenses have creeped up to the point where, you're making $1 million, but 900,000 of that is going out the door in expenses. So each year you're only saving $100,000. And that seems like a lot. But if your expenses are $900,000, then that means it's going to take you 9 years to save up 1 year's worth of wealth. Think about that. And this is the reason why people who make really good money will often not be able to retire, is because they're not actually wealthy. They might be making a ton of money, but they're not wealthy. And that's the most important number if you want to achieve financial freedom, is to increase your wealth. And you do that by increasing your income, decreasing your expenses. So that's number 1. Wealth is the ratio between what you make and what you spend. Number 2 is if you want to make more money, you have to raise your baseline temperature. Now, everybody has this internal thermostat, this internal money thermostat, where there's an amount of money that feels normal. And any amount over that number, it feels like a lot, feels unachievable. Whereas any amount underneath that number is typically doable. It's a quantity of money that you feel comfortable spending, let's say. For me, I used to think in $1,000 increments, where anything under $1,000 was okay. I could afford it. But as soon as it started getting over 1,000 into 2,000 or 3,000, I was like, that's a lot of money. And so imagine how difficult it would be for you if you were trying to pitch a product to a customer for $50,000, but your internal baseline temperature for money was to think that $1,000 is a lot. You probably would lack the conviction necessary to convince that person across from you that this is a good value, right? You might even have some doubts inside internally about, oh, this is a lot of money. And you might believe that you have the ability to add value, but you might doubt that you could bring that much value. So if you lack the conviction, you're never going to make that sale, right? Conversely, if you think of $1 million as a lot of money, then $50,000 is nothing, right? That's a drop in the bucket. So if I'm sitting here pitching you on $50,000 investment because I think $1 million is a lot, and I'm like, hey, listen, this $50,000, this is a killer deal, because I'm going your baseline number is so much higher that by comparison, yeah, it's a great value. And so one of the ways that you can make more money quite easily is just by raising your baseline temperature of what you expect. When you hear people say like, oh, I want to have my first $10,000 month, right? Like that works out to be $120,000. And you start to solve problems that will lead you to the result of $10,000 a month. But if you changed your number and you said, I want to make $100,000 this month, now you need to solve the problem very differently. And in trying to solve for $100,000 a month, you're much more likely to exceed a $10,000 month than you would ever have hopes of exceeding that $10,000 a month if you, in fact, were only trying to solve it by achieving $10,000 a month. Does that make sense? I don't know if I did a good job explaining that. All that's to say is what I've noticed is like the jumps in thinking about money is like $1,000 and then $5,000 and then $10,000 and then $20,000 and then $50,000 and then $100,000 and then $1 million, right? So the higher you can raise your baseline money thermostat, the easier it's going to be to make those sums of money because they become normalized. They no longer feel heavy. They no longer feel hard. And you start solving those problems differently than when you expect it to be hard and unachievable. All right. The third way to think about money, and this is one that I think holds back most people, honestly, is that you don't need money to make money. A lot of people think this. A lot of people think that you need money to make money and that like, oh, if only I'd been born with that silver spoon in my mouth, if I had the money, of course, then I could buy the real estate or I could buy the business or whatever. And sure, money is a resource and it's helpful. But the truth is, if you're given the resource, if you're given the money for free, you're not going to cherish it. You're not even going to understand how to use it effectively. So the money itself, the tool is not helpful because you haven't really learned how to use it yet. And so in a lot of cases, it can actually be an encumbrance. It can actually just be the thing that eventually leads to your downfall because you haven't learned how to wield the sword. You end up lopping off your own leg. Now, instead of thinking it takes money to make money, you have to flip this on its head. And you have to ask yourself, what does it actually take to make money? And in my estimation, it requires three things. It requires creativity, financial literacy, and consistent right action. So of these three, like money is not necessary in any of them. To be creative, to see opportunities, to take ideas and combine them in new, novel, functional ways, that's creativity. Financial literacy is understanding the rules of money, how the game is played. And consistent right action is saying, here's the idea, here's how I execute it, because $1 million idea is worthless without $1 million of execution. So if you can do those three things, you can make money. It's actually quite easy. So don't let that be a limiting belief that you adopt as it takes money to make money. And because I don't have money, I'll never make money. Or I need to first save up before I can start doing this. No, you don't lack for resources. You lack for resourcefulness. It's one of the most powerful quotes from Tony Robbins that I've ever heard. And it's 100% true. The most successful entrepreneurs are not the ones that have the most resources. They have the most resourcefulness. So try and cultivate that skill, that belief. It will serve you incredibly well. So those are three money thoughts that I think will serve you very, very well. That you don't need money to make money, that you need to raise your baseline temperature, and that wealth is a ratio between what you make and what you keep. You keep these three things in mind and you allow them to lead your actions. And I think you're going to be doing pretty all right in the money game. So guys, this is going to do it for me. I appreciate you as always. I'll see you back here tomorrow. But until then, stay hyper-focused, my friend.